I think that there are non-invasive ways to barrier methods and things you can do for occasional, seasonal birth control.
Hold on a second. They're anti-birth control excluding non-hormonal methods for seasonal usage only. We'll undertake barrier methods on the husband's birthday, perhaps for Christmas. Why is it only okay for seasonal that we've used occasionally in the not too much, because that wouldn't be godly. Like, what are you saying? There's nothing in the Bible that says you may use barrier protection but 2 times a year on special occasions. Hello lovely people, my name is Emma, welcome back to my channel, welcome if you are new. Girl Defined. Girl Defined, for the uninitiated. Sisters, long-term YouTubers, very biblical Christians, big into purity culture, modesty, quite heavily literalist. Their entire thing is teaching women how to be girls. And I mean that in the infantilization way, as well as just how to be a girl. I've covered some of their content before. I reviewed their book with Savvy. I nearly said classically savvy, just out of instinct. I don't know why. Let me calm down and explain what's actually going on. They released 2 videos recently. The first one about family planning, birth control, etc. Obviously, because of their position, anti-birth control. It's problematic across the board, but we'll get to it. Before we dive into that video, they released a second one. Both of these are an hour long, by the way, so we're not going to get through much. Okay, we're just going to touch the highlights here. I've got a sneeze coming. I wanted to highlight this second video first because I like to be confusing. Have you seen my new Ducky watch? It's amazing. Not because I like to be confusing. I'm full of beans today. I'm actually drinking decaf coffee right now, if you can believe such a thing. Girl Defined like to do this, where they introduce an expert. They bring along usually a doctor to basically back up exactly what, they share the exact same viewpoints. They never bring anyone in who has a different perspective or experience to them. They bring somebody in who shares their exact view on something so they can be like, wow, wow. If you haven't seen my video on the Girl Defined podcast that they did with Dr. Nancy Pearcey, you should check that out if you're interested in this kind of thing. But also, it's exactly the same thing where they bring in a doctor to talk about, in that case it was queer people, it was anti-queer religious propaganda, and they bring in a doctor and therefore position them as an expert. They show them off to their audience as an expert in a misleading way. So Nancy Pearcey had no qualifications in the area she was talking about. She was a doctor of some unrelated Christian thing. It's exactly the same thing with this video. This video is called What If Everything You Know About the Birth Control Pill is Wrong. A frightening video. And she introduces it. In fact, we'll just listen, shall we? This is how the video is introduced.
Hey sisterhood, it is Kristen here, and I have a very special guest as we are continuing the conversation on birth control, a huge topic. Bring truths that maybe other people would be a little shy to share about. And so I am so excited to introduce to you guys my guest, Dr. Leah Gordon, and she is both a functional medicine and naturopathic doctor that specializes in fertility and women's hormones and has helped countless women throughout their reproductive years.
Sounds fucking fantastic, doesn't it? Doesn't she sound like the exact expert you need? She's a fertility expert, she's a doctor, she's a functional medical doctor. Obviously, because I'm the way that I am, the first thing I did was went to find her LinkedIn to look at her actual education. Now, she's a real doctor. I'm perfectly comfortable calling her Dr. Gordon, because she did her 4 years, she has a doctorate. She is a doctor of naturopathic medicine. Now, there's nothing necessarily wrong with that. As a skeptic by nature, I cringe slightly at holistic approaches to medicine in general. But in principle, there's nothing wrong with that. There's nothing wrong with her learning about fertility and alternative methods of looking after yourself and whatever. But presenting her as a medical doctor is factually incorrect. Naturopathic medicine and holistic medicine, things like that, they do combine traditional medicine with holistic approaches. However, I found a Healthline article about it. I found a couple of interesting articles, which I will link down below. There's another article I'll share for you where a former naturopath describes it as basically witchcraft. But according to this Healthline article, naturopathic doctors have to do these years of study. They have to take a professional board exam to be registered. It's not like nutritionist or something, although interestingly this doctor also calls herself a nutritionist, which is not a protected term, so that's kind of interesting. In case you don't know what I mean, basically anyone can call themselves a nutritionist. It's not a protective It's not a protected term. You don't have to study to call yourself a nutritionist. You can buy an Herbalife box and call yourself a nutritionist. If you ever want to see somebody about your diet and nutrition, you want to talk to a dietitian. That is the protected term. So I think it's interesting that she has these two self-describing factors. I guess they work well together. And again, there's nothing technically wrong with either of these things, but it's interesting that she uses an unprotected term and a protected term to describe herself professionally. I find that really interesting and kind of strange. So they have to become licensed, they have to train, and their training does include a lot of the same basic traditional medicine as, you know, real doctors would study, but they aren't recognised as medical doctors. That is the key thing I want to highlight here, because that is not something that Girl Defined or Dr. Gordon herself are going to mention. They're just going to present it as if she is a medical doctor. And you can see from her education history that that is just not true. She has her doctorate in naturopathic medicine, which does include some of the same medical training as traditional medicine, but is primarily about holistic approaches and natural approaches to medical treatment. Maybe that seems like a really sort of boring intro. I just think that's really important to establish up front, because Girl Defined do have this history of bringing in who the fuck ever and pretending they are the appropriate expert in the field. Really, you want an actual medical doctor to discuss these things, right? Ideally, you'd have something like an RE, which stands for a reproductive endocrinologist. I was never going to remember that off the top of my head. That's the most common kind of fertility expert. I just think, and no shade to anyone who studied anything holistic, like I say, in principle there is nothing wrong with that, but I think it's telling that people like Girl Defined, who have a very specific agenda, an anti-birth control agenda with this, I think it's suspicious, and we should all know and highlight this fact. It's suspicious that they would choose somebody who is not recognised as a medical doctor over somebody who is medically qualified as their expert for this medical discussion, which is what it should be. I just want it out there. I want it noted because the thumbnail itself is very misleading. Doctor discourages the birth control pill. It's not that dissimilar from Nancy Pearcey, from getting a Bible doctor in to discuss, queer people's bodies and things that they are just absolutely unqualified to talk about. The first video of this collection then, Rethinking Birth Control, Family Planning, and When to Have Babies. The guest in this video is a woman called Candice Watters, or Waters, I'm probably saying that wrong, we'll hear it in a minute and then I'll feel bad. No fake, unrelated doctorate in this case. Her bio everywhere describes her first as wife and mum, in a very traditional, Christ-centric kind of way. She's the author of a book called Get Married, How to Make It Happen, What to Do to Make It Happen, something like that. Clearly shares exactly the same values as Girl Defined, because why talk to anybody else? Just to recap then, their first hour-long conversation is with miscellaneous Christian woman. Their second one is with doctor of holistic medicine, not a medical doctor. I just think it's worth noting because it seems an incredibly disingenuous approach to me. I'm going to kind of skip this intro because they say basically the same thing in every video. Every video I've watched of Girl Defined. This is a huge topic that we've been wanting to talk about for ages. Do you remember that Mitchell and Webb show? Do you remember Big Talk? That's what Girl Defined's videos start like.
Good evening and welcome to Big Talk. My name's Raymond Terrific, and yet again I stand at the eye of the storm of the world's ills, waving my staff like Gandalf and screaming, let's get this sorted.
And so joining me today is an old friend and the author of an amazing and provocative book called Start Your Family, Inspiration for Having Babies. Candice Watters, welcome to the Girl Defined Show.
Watters?
Thank you, Kristen. It is
Watters.
so fun to be with you today. Such a good thing to have this time together.
Why you and your husband decided to write this book about babies, about starting your family. Like, what inspired you guys?
We wanted to write this
Money.
book because we thought we would take the typical 5 years to get to know each other, that we would explore our new city together, that we both have high-powered jobs and save up a lot of money and buy our first home and maybe do a little travel. And about 6 months into our newlywed plan, our mentors came to visit us, Hugh and Mary Morgan, and she asked me during a walk, so when are you going to have babies? And I told her
Personally, it's okay to have mentors. Personally, in a video by this kind of Christian, our mentors came to visit us Huge red flag for me. Instantly makes me think of fucking Amway. It's this thing in fringe Christianity where you learn from, like, an older... It sounds creepy when I try to explain it. An older couple becomes your, like, mentor. I can't decide whether it sounds harmless and nice or incredibly creepy. I guess it depends on your background. Let me know about down below. Vote in the comments. Harmless or creepy? Yeah, an older couple will, like, mentor a younger married couple and give them all the advice, you know, from their experiences from when they were younger, which in many circumstances could be very nice and very useful. In many, not. And the reason I have these kind of cultish vibes is because that is really common in religious groups that are very insular, and it's purely about having somebody to reinforce those isolated values. Because if you went outside of your particular circle, you'd probably get a wide variety of different advice. Like, a lot of people would probably say, oh, we might have waited longer to have children, you know, you might want to be in this particular circumstance, you might not want to wait, you might want to just, when you feel ready, you would get a variety of information. Whereas when you have mentors from the exact same religious group as you, they are just reinforcing the same stuff you're being fed by your church or whatever. So not necessarily a terrible thing, just a red flag off the bat for me about Candice Watters and the kind of religious background she has, I will say.
Our big plan. And she said, oh, well, how old are you? And I said, well, I'm 27. Why? And she said, well, why do you think you'll still, or how do you know you'll still be fertile when you decide that you're ready to have kids?
And that is such a, like, a personal, direct question. Were you guys kind of taken, like, aback? Like, wait.
No, I don't think there's anything that's funny because I'm 27. So I'm sure Candice and Girl Defined would have opinions on me. If part of what you really want from life and what you have always wanted and what you and your partner definitely want is having children, I actually don't think there's anything wrong with sitting down and saying, okay, what's my fertility going to be like over the years? What's our fertility like? What's our energy levels going to be like over time? I don't think there's anything wrong with having those conversations. I do think somebody saying, oh, this is my plan for, you know, starting a family and stuff, and then going, how do you know you'll still be fertile, is a bit fucking weird. Which is, again, why I find the mentor thing kind of creepy.
What if there's something to what she's asking me that I need to be thinking about? I was more offended by the idea that I never thought about it than the fact that she broached the topic. You know, she did go where angels feared to tread.
Yes.
And I figured if I needed help, because I grew up in a traditional Christian home with lots of siblings, and so did my husband Steve, both sets of parents still married.
What a surprise. And incredibly insular, just like I postulated based on the things she said so far. I got a sixth sense for Christian groups.
And we had a very worldly understanding of what the early married years should look like, and especially about having babies.
That's code. If you're not familiar with this kind of, I want to say, they are fundamentalists. So if you're not familiar with this kind of Christian fundamentalist, a worldly view is something that is not godly. It's something that is... Kristen and Bethany tend to say that it's like the media. The only example they can ever think of off the bat is always magazines. It's always magazines before anything else. That's the worldly view comes from media, what is trending, what young people think, what is currently socially acceptable. That's the worldly view. If they're describing something as worldly, that means that it is contradictory to being godly. That's what that means. Isn't it culty that they've also got their own basically secret language? Any Christian woman watching this will know exactly what they mean, but it doesn't sound that weird because it's kind of a code word for outsiders. I just think the whole thing... Watch the videos where Savvy and I are reviewing their book, because it is creepy and I feel bad for how Kristen and Bethany were brought up. They can't help the way they are today. Well, they could now that they're adults, but they had the odds stacked against them, let's just say.
Needed help to get going on the path to family. We figured we're probably not alone. There are probably other people who need help.
Wow.
I'm going to skip ahead because I don't massively... God, I wish that more channels would use gosh darn chapters. If I'm doing a long video, I always try and use chapters. It just... Because I don't know when... If they could break it up and say, about the book and why she wrote it, and that could be a section I could be like, okay, I'm not interested in this, and just skip past it easily. Whatever, let's move on. I'm wasting more time by complaining about it.
It's not that everybody in the past had a biblical understanding. It's just that the science and technology and drugstores didn't have things that made it possible to move away from a biblical understanding. So you just had these built-in supports, and people thought, we're going to get married, and we know that babies are part of that. We're probably going to have kids. And that was a good thing. And
well, nah. The thing is, I guess Candice kind of said this when she said the pharmacies don't have stuff in place to delay it. Yeah, there just wasn't birth control. It wasn't that people were like, I mean, I'm not from the past, obviously. Am a time traveler conspiracy? At least 3 people have said I would make a good doctor from Doctor Who. Time travel Emma confirmed. I'm only comfortable saying this because both of these women are as qualified as me to know about what the people of thousands of years ago were thinking. I feel like it's an assumption to say that they just knew what was right and that this is just a part of marriage and we had that social thing. Maybe that's a part of it, but also there just wasn't birth control. This is the part that I guess they will leave unsaid. Sex is also a natural part of life. For most people will experience sexual attraction, want to do something with that. That might, in some societies, that might mean, okay, let's get married, which massive problem in Christianity, massive problem when you impose this kind of purity culture. People get married without having had sex, and then that can cause all sorts of problems. It can also go perfectly fine. It's up to you whether you want to roll the dice. Sex is not as important to some people as others, whatever. Sexuality is inherent to humanity, right? Otherwise, the species wouldn't reproduce. Wanting to have sex is normal, and so back in the day, people wanted to have sex and there was no birth control, so people had babies more and younger. Whereas now there is birth control, so people are able to have more choice. It's not that they were more naturally biblical or moral back in the day.
Babies are a common grace gift from God. They're one of the primary ways that he sanctifies us. And we miss out. And I don't think
I don't want to be the contrarian atheist for this whole thing, but to be a contrarian atheist for a second, if babies are a gift from God, which a lot of people see them as, and you can understand why. It's a precious little life that you love more than anything in the world, and they're so cute. They've got tiny little hands, they poo and pee everywhere, and they throw up on you, and they're loud and annoying, but they got their good points for sure. If babies are a gift from God and his way of showing us love, doesn't by extension that mean that miscarriage is, a punishment from God? Basically what I'm asking is, if babies are a gift from God, why are there miscarriages? Why are there stillbirths? Why is there infant baby death? You can extend this question enormously, because suddenly we have the problem, the question of a moral God, which is, half my issue with Christianity, and that is just, if you believe in that kind of Christianity and an active God who gives you things, who has planned your life, who bestows upon you the gift of a child, suddenly that throws up all these moral questions about the horrible things that happen. I'm just throwing that out there.
Is there anything you can tell us about the history of the pill? Just kind of like when it came into play, where...
I presume she's asking this because, God, I keep forgetting her name. Candice. I keep thinking Catherine. I'm very sorry. Did Candice research this for her book? Is that why she's asking? Because I feel like on the surface, Candice is wildly unqualified to answer that question.
Where it came from, or is that out of your scope?
Well, it hit the, I don't know. Steve should be here for this. He's my numbers guy. He did all the research for the book.
Give like dates or anything specific, but just like when the pill came in and how it really, I feel like it was so widely accepted and still is to this day. It's almost like not even thought if a doctor said.
She's also talking about the pill without being very specific. Now, the pill is the colloquial term for birth control, but there are so many different kinds. Just the pill could either be the mini pill or the contraceptive pill, and I assume they weren't created at the same time. The earliest forms of birth control, as well as abortion, were found in ancient Egypt and Mesopotamia as far back as 1850 BC. Papyrus scrolls were found to contain directions on how to make birth control using honey, acacia leaves, and also lint as a form of cervical cap. That is so cool and interesting. So when I was saying, they just didn't have birth control back then, ancient Egypt and Mesopotamia were already on that shit. The contraceptive pill was developed in the 1950s. It was developed by American scientists led by Dr. Gregory Pincus and with the support of women's rights campaigner Margaret Sanger. She was the founder of Planned Parenthood. No wonder Girl Defined hate it.
Get on the pill, even if it's not for birth control, but just acne or, just for hormonal stuff. It's just become so popular and so common today that I don't even think women now, like modern women, what are they called? Gen Xers, Gen Zers, I don't know, millennials who are like thinking, differently about it because it's just all they've ever known.
Like any medical advancement. Like not dying from the common cold. They can even use these hormonal treatments to treat hormonal issues. Like, yeah, it's fucking medicine.
Almost every OBGYN, ask any young woman who's going to the doctor before she gets married, the doctor will, just as a matter of course, say, so what's your birth control going to be? Here, I'll write you a script for the pill. There's kind of this built-in assumption. And Christian OBGYNs are not they are not immune to this way of thinking. The assumption is we're going to go right onto the...
Because, okay, so here's my experience of just going to the doctor in general for, like, general checkups and things like that. They will ask about what medication you're currently on, and therefore, by extension, usually they will ask something like, are you taking any birth control? And if you say no, then they'll ask if you're interested, and you can discuss your options, and that's it. It's not like they're forcing it upon... If you didn't want to take birth control, it'd be very easy for you to have that conversation with your doctor.
We'll get to the baby thing when we get there. There's so little talked about during the premarital counseling with a lot of pastors. It's just not top of mind for a lot of people. I'm surprised how many young couples get married without having a conversation about how many kids they want, or if they want children, or what will they do if they can't have children, or what if it's just not top of mind. And I think we've become so focused on superficial things like the dress and the ceremony. And
I think she's right there, actually. Mark this moment, I completely agree with Candice. Again, I think it's a little bit weird to have your pastor be a premarital counselor, but whatever, the whole mentorship thing I find really fucking weird. But yeah, I wish more people would talk about those important things, talk about the marriage, rather than just the wedding when it's time to get married. It's like, we love each other, let's get married. Chat about whether you align on having children, how many children you want to have, when about you want to have, because you don't want to get married and then that to be a deal breaker later. I actually completely agree with that. It should be about that and not just about what dress you're going to wear on the day, because it's a party that is prepping for a lifetime. You should be talking about the lifetime together. I agree with Candice. Oh my god. Clip that and cancel me.
I know so many women, amazing women in my church and friends, and just women who are so ambitious. They're like on fire for the Lord and passionate and just like go-getter kind of women. And I'm just thinking of a few specific situations, and I love these girls to death. But, we've had...
But here she goes. She's going to be mean about her girlfriends. They are so mean about other girls, like friends, really close friends that they grew up with in their book. They are so fucking mean. Girl Defined, for all they are Christian values, are really mean. So for her to be like, and I love them to death, but... is not surprising to me.
Had some conversations about family and babies, and I've seen, kind of this recurring pattern of these women who are super intentional in a lot of other areas of their life. Yeah. But then, we bring up the topic of kids, and again, it's kind of like you're saying that, I don't know, maybe. And it's just kind of like, wow, there's a disconnect to where we're so intentional and planning and preparing and growing and learning in so many.
Well, like, you might just not know. It's okay to say, I don't know, if you don't know yet. It might change over time. I know some people who never wanted kids and then suddenly really wanted kids. I know people who really wanted kids and then suddenly didn't want any kids. It's okay not to know when you're like a teenager or whatever.
Babies are a reward from the Lord.
Okay, as I was skimming through, because we've heard them talk about family planning, they're recycling the same thoughts over and over. This is unedited, so fair enough. But as I was skimming through, I heard her say a slightly different wording of earlier, babies are a reward from the Lord. And I hate that. I really hate that take. And I think I know they're talking about saying the unsaid, and they're clearly comfortable and friends, and this is okay, but I do think that's kind of insensitive given that Kristen has had a history of fertility issues. For her to say that babies are a reward from God, again, implies that not getting that reward means you're not doing something right. It means you've done something wrong. I just think that's completely the wrong way to look at it, the wrong way to phrase it. And I'm sure it's just a turn of phrase, but what if it's meant to be a reward? What did Kristen do wrong? What's she done differently? She's dedicated her life to God and teaching young girls how to be a good Christian girl. Completely wrong, in my opinion, but according to them, she's done all of the right things. So why hasn't God given her this reward? It just throws up so many awful questions like that I just think that's the worst way to talk about children.
So one other thing I want to address when it comes to reasons couples are hesitant to have kids is a huge one I hear all the time, and it's finances. Yeah. And you said something very interesting at the beginning of this conversation, budget for everything except kids. What does that mean?
It means that unlike anything you can buy, babies are eternal. And they will be somewhere forever, heaven or hell, hopefully with you in heaven.
Yeah.
Everything else we buy.
Is that not highlighting another fear that Christian parents might have? You might have this child that you love with all of your heart. They are the most wonderful gift from God. They might go to hell for all eternity and be apart from you. Who can have kids with that as a worry in their head? Who can live like that? That's so terrifying. What a weird, awful thing to just casually throw out. They are eternal. They might go to heaven or hell. Hopefully heaven. Just what the fuck was that? Just a reminder, your children, your lovely babies might go to hell for eternity.
And I think even the most amazing professional achievements pale in comparison to having a baby.
Yeah.
Creating
I had
new
a friend.
life.
Pumping out a baby is a much bigger achievement than anything you can do professionally, academically. Some people put their whole fucking life and soul into being a mother or a father, just a parent in general, and that's awesome. Okay? It's really cool. I'm really happy for them if they find that fulfilling, if that is what you consider success. That is wonderful. I think success is more about happiness, personally. But to basically suggest that anyone who has not had a baby is far less successful, there's no personal aspect to it. Just if you're not having a baby, you're not as successful as me. And that's why I'm qualified to tell you all about it. It's just rude.
Major Western nations are frantic because they don't have enough people. People are, human capital is the best capital there is.
So this, okay, I'm not going off I'm not willing to touch the either end of the conspiracy angle of overpopulation or underpopulation. I don't want to go there. I know that populations have dipped in a lot of places, especially in Asia, I think. Let's consider the reality of why people aren't having children. It's financial. She basically said earlier, don't bother planning for it because babies are eternal. You know, they're going to go to heaven or hell forever. And so don't worry about the finances. But that is the reason that people aren't having children. And so rather than making an argument for birth control, and what's going to happen is you're going to produce more parents that can't care for their children because they simply can't afford to. They can't keep their children in expensive school uniforms. They can't afford to feed that many mouths, etc., and ending up with children in the care system or something much worse happening, instead of just leading towards that, because more people is better, and not acknowledging the fact that some people just cannot look after children. We should be focusing on the fact that there is no system in place to protect people that can't afford to look after a family, to look after a growing family. That is a problem. Much like every time we discuss somebody like Laurie from The Transformed Wife, they never will ever acknowledge the root cause of the problems that they have. So this is the same with abortion as well as birth control. I guess those are kind of intertwined. With women not being stay-at-home mothers anymore, we have all of these things where there's these base points that say I disagree with them on, but the root cause is an issue that we should both agree on and be tackling together, and would be much more productive. Whereas this is a fucking waste of time, in my opinion. It can only cause harm. Advocating for abstinence and then no birth control can only cause problems, and not worrying about the finances of raising a child, I think that's terrible fucking advice. And I think it comes from knowing Kristen Bethany's background and that this is a friend of theirs. I assume it comes from a place of incredible fucking privilege. If you want people to be able to have large families and then stay at home and raise children, be able to afford everything they want, you need to tackle the financial issues. You need to consider something evil and communist like universal basic income. You need to consider the fact that a single income does not support a whole family today. It just doesn't. That's why both parents have to work. And then who's looking after the kids? And then if nobody's around to look after the kids, you have to afford childcare. So irresponsible to pretend that the financial issues isn't a thing, that it's not a part of it, and it's just like, yeah, but you're gonna love them so much, so don't even worry about it. Well, fucking maybe that's easy for you to say, but it's not for most people, and we should talk about it.
The Lord has given us a cycle that we can track and understand, and He's given us a mind to figure out when we're fertile. And we can use that to space our babies naturally. I think that there are non-invasive ways to barrier methods and things you can do for occasional, seasonal birth control. We did that at points in our marriage.
Hold on a second. Hang on a second. They're anti-birth control excluding non-hormonal methods for seasonal usage only. Only if it's a particularly fruity season. Okay, we'll undertake barrier methods on the husband's birthday, perhaps for Christmas. That's what she's saying here, right? If that's okay some of the time, why isn't it okay all of the time except for when you want to have kids? If you don't want to have any more kids, why wouldn't you always use that protection? Why is it only okay for seasonal that we've used occasionally in the past? Not too much, because that wouldn't be godly. Like, what are you saying? There's nothing in the Bible that says you may use barrier protection but 2 times a year on special occasions. That's bullshit.
When, you know, the baby was brand new and we got the green light from the doctor, okay, you're clear to go back to your marital activities. And it's like, oh, but if I get pregnant and she's 6.5 weeks old, what would I do?
Yeah,
you know? So I think there is Christian freedom to use certainly our understanding of our cycles, but even for seasons, I think some forms of birth control, as long as they're not potentially abortifacient. And I am always opposed to chemical birth control because I've just seen the damage it can do to a woman.
Classic fear-mongering. It's akin to saying something like, I've seen the damage that diabetes medication can do. You know what I mean? Like, some people, they don't... I'm going to let her finish just in case she's going to talk about this, and then I'll get on to what my point was going to be.
Using birth control changes the act of marriage, the intimacy of sexual intercourse, because you can't help but have some sort of a spiritual barrier. I can't explain it. It's not scientific, but I felt it. And I know that when we decided to start trying and we were suddenly not doing anything to try to prevent pregnancy, there was an openness and a oneness that was so overwhelmingly beautiful to me, and this sense of...
So Candice prefers it raw. I'm just saying the words she's toying with, okay? Forgive me if that's too on the nose to the point of being rude, but given that they have been consistently rude about other people, like always, and they're all about saying what, goes unsaid, that's basically what she's saying. And I just want to point out that just because Candice had a better time raw, just because that was her personal preference, doesn't mean that it will be everybody's, and it doesn't mean that you can't have a fabulous time. And you know what, Candice? It's 2022. There are barrier methods that can come very, very close. Oh my god, what are we talking about? If not there, you can get very, very close to that same wonderfully open feeling whilst using protection, with protection. So what I was gonna say, because it seems like they're not gonna go into it, maybe the other video, I've already been going for an hour, we can't do another hour of this. If you want me to go over the other video, leave a comment down below, because this is gonna be too long otherwise. Maybe they will talk about it in the video that is more specifically about birth control, but they've not talked about, or at least not more than discussing sort of acne, people that require birth control for hormonal reasons. When I was young, when I was like a teenager, I had friends who were not yet sexually active, but needed to be on birth control for one reason or another. Get a bit personal, I suffer issues with my monthly cycle the only medication that would help would be the combination pill. I actually can't take that because I have a history of migraines and the risk of a blood clot is deemed high enough, the doctors won't prescribe it to me. Sucks for me. If that could solve the problem for other people, I would never consider taking that away from them. Essentially forcing some people to go through extreme pain every month Again, some people suffer hormonal imbalance issues that can cause things like acne or hair growth, stuff like that. And if there's a medication out there that is just like any other medication you would take for any other problem, if that's available, why should they not take it? Just because the side effect is that you won't accidentally have a baby? They would rather, and this all, I think a lot of this boils down to the abortion question, because they really believe that, like, any interference with even just unfertilized eggs in your body is like risking a life in some way. That's kind of where they're coming from, and that's why they won't touch birth control of any of that medical nature. And they basically would rather women suffer terrible pain, passing out. I had days when I was younger where I couldn't hold a pen because I was shaking so much with agony. Like, if I could have taken a pill that would have prevented that, I abso-fucking-lutely would have done, because I am worth more than a hypothetical baby. I'm an actual real person, not a hypothetical person that could exist one day. And like, what if you're not even sexually active? Like, there's no chance that you could fertilize an egg. There's no chance that you could have a baby, but there are medical benefits to you being on the pill. They're still against that because it could change your body. But basically because anti-medicine fear-mongering. It blows my mind. It's so insensitive. It's such bad advice, especially because these people are specifically targeting young women and telling them how to live their lives in a godly way. Like, this is the right or wrong thing to do to get you to heaven or hell, you know? And they're telling them, don't take this medication that your doctor might recommend to massively help your problems and improve your life because God. It makes me really angry. It's so... And neither of them are fucking remotely qualified to have this conversation. Even less than the other video, where the doctor involved is barely qualified. I don't know, man.
Keep homeschooling, keep teaching those kids, pouring into them. The world, the flesh, and the devil conspires against our kids. Satan is so eager to devour our children. That picture of the dragon in Revelation, waiting to devour. And they need parents who are champions for them, who say, I will not give you over to the world. I am parenting you and claiming.
But God made the world. Okay, that's enough. When we get into fucking the Dragon of Revelation and how Satan's gonna eat your children, so you need to isolate them from all other viewpoints, again, culty. What did I say earlier? Fucking culty, insular, creepy upbringing, just like Kristen and Bethany had. It's fucked up they're doing it to their children too. It really upsets me. They should have all choices open to them, and they should be able to choose something that is not this fundamentalist, creepy version of Christianity. I think that's the time to end it, because like, I just can't anymore. I can't deal with anymore. If you want me to look at the other video, let me know. We'll deal with it. But basically, this is classic girl-defined, classic Kristen. It's discussing an issue that nobody has any qualification talking about. It's giving terrible advice to young women based on their specific interpretation of the Bible from their specific insular branch of Christianity and what their mentors and their pastor taught them. I just hate it. I really hate it. Cool. Do leave your thoughts down below. Give this video a cheeky like if you enjoyed it. Remember that you will probably love your babies for eternity, but they may go to hell and you'll never see them again. Before we go, I would like to give a big shout out and a thank you to my giant chickens over on Patreon. God damn it, Conla, and thank you so much for watching. Do all the things. Subscribe and press buttons and all of the things, and go and see my other things in other places. And then have a very lovely week, and I will see you really soon. What a mess that ending was.